Hi, this is Tom Fulmer with National Drug Screening, and welcome to the NDS Video Blog series. Today we're going to be talking about problems that occur during the drug testing process for employers and for supervisors. I'd like to welcome our guest, Mr. Joe Reilly, President of National Drug Screening. He's going to be here to answer some questions for us about problems that occur during the drug testing process. Joe, welcome to the show.
Hi, Tom. How are you today?
Doing great.
Good.
Now, we're into situations all the time where we get calls from employers and they have an issue, or calls from collectors and they're having an issue. You know, when everything goes smoothly, everybody's happy. There's no problems that come up. And so we don't have these situations that happen so often. So I want to ask you a few ways that we can handle certain problems that come up. You know, starting off with collectors. You know, you have a collector that calls in and says, you know, hey, we have a temperature out of range issue, or meaning the temperature doesn't show up. How do you handle it when they call in and they have these kind of issues?
Okay, good question, Tom. So specimen collectors on a urine drug test, when the donor comes out of the restroom, they provide a urine in a cup. It has a temperature strip and the temperature is red. It must be within body temperature, between 90 and 100. If it's not, there's a potential that it has been tampered with. The procedure for the collector is to process that specimen that is out of temperature range and then move to another collection. And with DOT testing, it is an observed collection. And then the second specimen, particularly if it's an observed collection, will be within range, and that will be the test of record. When the result comes back from the lab, it will be that particular result that the employer should utilize.
And that's something that happens, you know, sometimes during the collection process. But it's not just handling that, because a lot of times they have to take that next step and contact the employer representative, and sometimes they don't know what's going on or don't understand that situation as well. Do you find that's an issue with employers sometimes? They're not really sure how to handle that from their perspective?
Yes, absolutely, Tom. And see, it's really important from the point of view of the specimen collector that they are well trained to do their job properly. But at the place of the workplace, what we call DER, or designated employer representative, or the person in charge of the drug testing program at the workplace, they really need to be trained also so that they understand these situations. So even though there are going to be problems from time to time, the way to best handle those problems is that we have well-trained folks at the point of collection, at the laboratory, with the medical review officer, and also, very important, that the employer representative in charge of the drug testing program is also trained on the proper procedures.
And so, you know, that's one of the things that we do hear quite often. Another one is having a shy bladder type of situation, where not only does the collector have certain things they have to deal with that may not deal with very often, but also the employer then has to take certain action as well as the medical review officer. Can you tell us a little bit how, you know, they handle that situation from both the collector side and then also the challenges with the designated employer representative, how they would handle that?
Yes, absolutely, Tom. So the shy bladder is when the individual that's going for the drug test is having difficulty providing the required amount of urine for the drug test. So we call that a shy bladder process. The shy bladder process gives that donor, that individual, up to 3 hours to provide the proper specimen for testing. The proper specimen must have a sufficient amount of urine. So that individual is given water to drink over that 3-hour period, and as soon as possible, they can provide another specimen. And if it's enough specimen for sufficient volume for testing, then it can go off to the lab. If the 3 hours expires, that test is basically going to be a refusal. And the employer representative needs to be aware of what that shy bladder process is and how it works. Now, there's an exception to that issue about a refusal. There's the possibility the individual may have a medical condition that prevents them from urinating within 3 hours. If that's the case, and it can be documented by a physician, then that test event will not be a refusal.
And that's something that's very interesting and how they handle that. So who actually makes that call to have them evaluated? Is that going to be the employer? Is that going to be the medical review officer? Who's going to make that call and the ultimate decision whether it's actually a refusal or not?
Sure. So after the 3 hours, if the individual has not been able to provide the specimen, that individual either that day or the next day will report back to their employer representative. That employer representative will coordinate with the assistance of the medical review officer or the MRO, will coordinate a visit for that individual employee to go see a physician for that evaluation to determine if there's a medical explanation for that inability to provide the urine specimen within the 3-hour period.
So let's shift gears for just a minute. So far we've talked about issues that happen with the collector that the employer also has to be involved with potentially, but there's some things that actually initiate with the employer that quite often can become a problem. We hear calls all the time of when it's a reasonable suspicion. They suspect somebody's under the influence, but sometimes it's not just they've observed something, but they may have just heard something from someone. So this becomes a kind of a tricky situation to handle. So what are some of the challenges you see there, and how should they handle those?
Yeah, absolutely, Tom. That's a great question, because reasonable suspicion is a really important topic, because when you have an individual working and there's reasonable suspicion that they're under the influence of potentially illegal drugs or alcohol, we may have a safety issue, and it's really important that we clear up that safety issue. Reasonable suspicion drug testing should be done when we have that situation where an individual is showing signs or symptoms of potentially being under the influence. Now, supervisors make that reasonable suspicion determination, and in order for them to make that reasonable suspicion determination, they need to receive training on making those reasonable suspicion determinations, training on signs and symptoms of drug use or under the influence of alcohol, training about these drugs and how they work and how they affect people. Now, recently, I published a new book. It's called Reasonable Suspicion Testing. And this is available on our website. And this is part of the training that supervisors can receive. So we encourage employers to get a copy of this book and take a look at it.
Well, and this book is an excellent, man. When you go through, it also has a lot of the things that are required by, say, the DOT, which requires supervisor training. If it's a DOT, but a lot of times if it's not DOT regulated, they're not necessarily required, but it is a good idea. Because sometimes it's not that instant safety concern, but doesn't reasonable suspicion also come up sometimes when it may be an ongoing concern, a change in behaviors? That's something also that they need to look for, and that's something I believe you've addressed in the book, the signs and symptoms of ongoing use.
Yes, it is, Tom. So we see two different types of reasonable suspicion. One is when there is an immediate concern, and then secondly, it's when a concern based on an employee's performance and behavior, and that could be something that happens over a period of time, a lack of performance. And we address in the book, DOT required reasonable suspicion testing, and we address, which is always immediate for DOT. But for non-DOT, it could be an immediate situation, but it also could be something that is occurring over time that's based on performance or characteristics that this person's performance is deteriorating.
Excellent points there, and I think that's something that a lot of employers and supervisors are not prepared to handle, so it's really good that you have this. Now, this is available on the website, correct?
Absolutely. This is available on the National Drug Screening website, and individuals can call. They can actually call and get discounts on quantity orders.
Excellent. So, Joe, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. A great book out here, Reasonable Suspicion Testing for Drugs and Alcohol, a guide to workplace for workplace supervisors. So make sure you get that on nationaldrugscreening.com. So, Joe, thank you for joining us today.
Great to be here, Tom.
That. Make sure you check out our other videos on our NDS blog at www.nationaldrugscreening.com, where there's a wealth of information to help you do your job better and to keep you informed on what's going on out there in the workplace. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next video.